Okay, so let's just be real, girl. I have a lot of unpopular opinions to go through today. Hey, welcome to my video. If you're from my Instagram, I love you. And if you're not from my Instagram, love you all the same. Welcome to Monthly Book Club, a series here on my channel where I tell you exactly what I read each month and exactly what I rate it. As always, a few disclaimers before we begin. I'm really not here to bash books or authors. I am here, however, to tell you my honest review and my honest opinion about the books that I purchase and read, but it is never my intention to do that in any sort of a mean way. I think you can still say what you want to say without absolutely ripping a book apart, and that's what I strive to do here. Also, when it comes to my rating, if you were planning on reading a book before I talked about it here, and let's say I rated it low, or maybe even did not finish, I highly encourage you to still read that book. Honestly, you guys, reading is so subjective, and the exact reason that I might not like a book might be the reason that it's your favorite thing you've ever read, and honestly, both opinions are valid. So please don't get swayed by my reviews. If you still want to read something, if you still want to love something, absolutely do so. Some of my favorite books are getting trashed on Goodreads every single day, and you know what? I really don't care about that. That's none of my business. If I love it, and I'm not ashamed of it, and you shouldn't be either. And the last thing, I'm just gonna put up 2 pictures up on the screen right now for you so that you can see kind of what my rating system looks like usually. Obviously, this is all subject to change. It is dependent on my mood that day and a whole array of other things. So it's really not 100% foolproof, but it is kind of what I try to base my ratings on for the most part. Okay, now I think we really covered all the bases, and if you're still here and still want to be a part of book club, then please keep watching. So to start off with, I'm gonna have to tell you that October for me was not my favorite. It was not my best reading month. I kept picking up books that I personally didn't vibe with more than any other month I can recall recently. And you know what? That sometimes happens too. I debated if I even wanted to talk about this, because what I really always want to talk about in these little bookish videos is the books that I'm excited by, the books that I had fun with, and the books that I loved reading. And also, I think it's kind of pointless to really hate on certain books because, like I said earlier, if they're not for me, that's completely okay, but that does not mean that they're not for anybody else. So I don't usually like to dwell in the negative, but you know what? I felt like for transparency's sake, it was important for me to tell you this because you would probably notice it later on in the rapid fire ratings, where if I get a little snarky there, I do apologize in advance. But for right now, let's talk about what I loved this month. So we're starting off with Riding the Sugar High. As you know, tropes first. This is a contemporary small town romance. It also features close proximity, which you know I love. And now let me tell you a little bit about it. It's about Primrose and Logan. Now, Primrose is a candy maker, which, by the way, adorable profession. Also, she's an influencer, and she sort of stumbles into Logan's small town with a plan, shall we say. She's going over there to retrieve something. Now, Logan, he's a farmer, a cowboy, but his mental health is in shambles a little bit, if I do say so myself. So he's doing some, let's say, questionable things. So at this point for Logan, Primrose might actually be his only ticket out of jail, and so he agrees to take her in as a roommate. Now, you might be asking yourself, wait a minute, why would Prim agree to this? Well, it just so happens that she absolutely committed the stupidest crime in history, and she needs Logan just as much as he needs her at this point. And so obviously, you know what happens. Close proximity does its thing, but at a certain point, they both start to feel like being with each other isn't really a sentence. It always feels more and more like a reward. And yet Primrose is not from here, so there is a deadline in which she knows that she's gonna have to leave, but her and Logan are both dreading that. Now, I'm not gonna spoil any more, but just know that this plot line, this storyline was so cute and funny, and I'm not doing it justice here. There is much more to it. But again, I'm not telling you because I don't want to spoil it. Now let's get down to the rating. So for me, this was a 4-star read, and on the spicy scale, it was 2 chili peppers. Overall, I liked both of the main characters individually, so it was very easy to root for them as a couple. The main female character was so fun, and she was quirky and unique, and I loved reading about her. She was honestly a blast. Also, the dynamic between her and the main male character character. I loved that there was just the right amount of angst and good chemistry, you know? And like I said, the plot was definitely comedy level funny, and it was interesting and had quite a bit of twists and turns. So this was one of those books that I really liked, and I definitely will be reading more by this author in the future. Now we're moving on to my book of the month, and that is, drumroll please, Hooked. So this is a dark contemporary romance. It is also a retelling of Peter Pan. So let me explain that a little bit further. So it is about James, Peter, and yes, you guessed it, Wendy. James, also nicknamed Hook, has always had one agenda, and that is to destroy his enemy, and one of those enemies is Peter. Now, they're all in the mafia business, but Peter's daughter, Wendy, once upon a time, pun not intended actually, just shows up at James's bar, and James starts crafting a plan of how he's gonna use her to get to his enemy. Once he starts talking to Wendy, once he starts spending time with her though, he finds out that he actually does like her, and his little plan of revenge just got more difficult. In fact, he decides that he wants to keep her while still getting his revenge. Now, at a certain point, a twist happens where he feels like Wendy actually betrayed him and starts to think that his enemy sent her to him on purpose. Mind you, Wendy is a diva living her life. She has no idea about any of this, okay? So that's really not the truth, but personally, I thought that was a very interesting twist and I liked reading about it. But anyway, eventually he does realize that Wendy is just an innocent bystander, but now the question is, what's more important to him, revenge or Wendy? And now onto the rating. So obviously, as book of the month, this has to get a 5-star rating for me. I mean, come on now. It also gets 2 chili peppers, which is kind of my standard spicy rating, but that doesn't mean that I didn't think it was spicy, okay? Now, one thing that I will preface this by is I'll say that as soon as I finished this book, I went on Goodreads, and a lot of people were sort of describing it as like a Wattpad romance. I personally think there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I loved Wattpad, but obviously that's being thrown around as an insult nowadays. And you know what? I don't think that's right, and I don't think that's fair. Let's talk about it. Honestly, I've always loved Peter Pan. I've always kind of had a sort of, shall we say, hear me out thing for Captain Hook. So I mean, if anybody wants to do 50 more retellings, I'm probably gonna read them. So that's my little bias right there. But also overall, it was a really creative idea to put these characters that we all know and love into a dark mafia romance. I thought the characters fit pretty well into that world. And up to 50% of the book, everything is so attention grabbing, exciting, and it never lost my interest. Then from about 50 to 65%, I believe, there was that anticipation because James thought Wendy betrayed him, but she didn't, but he thought she did. And it was this whole what's gonna happen moment. So obviously I was there for that. And from 75% on, there were so many cool plot twists that I thought were very gaggy, and I just simply couldn't put this book down. At one point, I believe I had to sit up to continue reading. It was one of those moments. So overall, very happy with this one. It was for sure the highlight of my October. Now let's move on to the boyfriend goal. This obviously, if you couldn't tell, is a sports romance, specifically hockey. It's also forbidden as he's her brother's teammate, and also there is close proximity in this one too. I'm sure you're sensing a pattern here. So Josie moves across the country. Things are not really going her way this one night, and she meets this gorgeous, handsome stranger. She never does what she's about to do, but she decides to break the rules with him and just have a nice little one-night stand. She had a great old time. Next morning though, she wakes up and finds out that he's not only her brother's teammate, but also her new roommate, as, like I said, things are not quite going to plan for her. And so what are they gonna do? Obviously they move in together, but they decide that they're just gonna keep it casual. They're just gonna be friends, guys, okay? And honestly, when has that ever not worked out? Well, you're right, it won't work out in this book either, boop. Okay, but let me tell you, it's actually really fun and it has more depth than just that, especially when Wesley knocks on her door and tells her exactly what he would like to do to break the friendship rule between them. So I really like this one as well. This was a 4-star read and 2 chili pepper rating from me. I must say right off the bat, I really like how Wesley was written. He seems like such a good dude with a good moral compass. He helps her because it's the right thing to do, not because he he wants anything from her or because her brother is his teammate. Honestly, it's just because he's a cinnamon roll type of boyfriend, just good and comforting. I loved that, and I also loved the relationship between them. After their initial bump in the road, I felt like their relationship was just honest and blunt. And you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like all of the relationships between any of the characters in this book, literally take your pick, were very wholesome and felt like a warm hug. Whenever they ran into problems with each other, the problem solving seemed very healthy and something that I know not of. So overall, I had this fuzzy and cozy feeling the whole way through, and I really did appreciate that. Also, the whole thing is not super predictable either. I know what you're thinking. It sounds really predictable, but there was a fun element of a certain list added in this book, which was a great way to spice up the plot in my opinion. And now for our last full review, we're going to be talking about a series, and the books are called Between Life and Death and Between Sun and Moon. So these are both a dark high fantasy romance novels, which I personally love, and I will be giving you a little synopsis of both of them together because I don't want to spoil the sequel in case you plan on reading it, but I will be commenting on them and rating them separately. So on the secluded continent of, we know how I am with pronouncing things, Edenvale could be a secret third option, honestly. Magic is prohibited, and whoever has magic is labeled cursed. If you are cursed, you have to be cleansed, and that is horrific, and it includes burning you at the stake, basically. But of course, there is a rebellious group of cursed people who want to defend their lands from war. And when Sage's brother gets drafted to defend the lands from the rebels, she has to give up her cozy, secluded cottage life and go bring her brother back. How is she gonna do that? Well, of course, duh, she's gonna join the rebels. However, the leader of the rebels, Vaughn, is dark, handsome, mysterious, and her mission suddenly might not be as straightforward as she initially thought it was. So now the ratings. Book number 1 for me was 3 stars and 2 chili peppers. Overall, immediately liked both of the main characters, and I liked the initial plot, albeit at a certain point it was getting a little bit predictable, as I was pretty much able to guess correctly what's gonna happen, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. For me, I know that sometimes I even like knowing exactly what's gonna happen. It curbs my anxiety, you know, it gives me a sort of peace. So overall, the concept was good, and even with the predictability factor, I thought it was interesting. And from 70% on, it was a really gaggy book. I wish more pages would have been dedicated to explain this world to us rather than it getting sort of haphazardly revealed at the end, and I guessed it even before then. And I also would have loved Vaughn's POV because the main female character was kind of lost, and then at certain points I was kind of lost because she didn't explain anything to us, because literally she did not know what was happening. And so that was not my favorite, but overall it ended on a cliffhanger, and I was like, okay, I need to read book 2 and I need to know. And so with that, we're segueing on to the second one. So for me, honestly, I have to say this was a 2-star read and 2 chili peppers. The beginning of book 2 honestly reminds me so much of book 1, as she meets somebody and she ends up asking some questions, but the answers never get revealed, and it sort of gets repetitive in my opinion in that way. And so by 30% of the book, when the main female character still doesn't really know much and can't remember anything, that kind of got tired and played out for me personally. I also feel like the main female character is repeating her exact same mistakes from book 1, where she literally doesn't know the answer to something, so she keeps jumping to conclusions without knowing the whole story, and also that was kind of tired. And so by a certain point I ended up skimming a lot, and by the end of the book, again, the questions that I had got answered haphazardly, but also not fully at all. And you know what? In book 1, when we didn't get all the answers, I was like, oh, they're gearing up for a really good and juicy book 2, which I can totally understand, obviously. But then book 2 was also kind of sort of like, go ahead, girl, give us nothing. And now I will use this time and opportunity to say that a lot of people don't agree with my opinion on Goodreads. A lot of people love it, praise it, they think it's amazing, and good for them. But I honestly, I'm not trying to be mean, but I could have done without. And so I would not read book 3. For me, this is kind of where my journey ends with this series. Okay, now rapid fire rating where I minimally explain / don't really explain my ratings to you at all. Unless you request a specific explanation in a future video, I'm just gonna say what I have to say and leave it here. But we're gonna go through the rest of the reads really quickly, so let's see what we have. I'm gonna be reading these off of my phone just so you know. So first of all, we have Branded Hearts. For me, this was 2 stars and 2 chili peppers. Good premise. I wanted to like it, but honestly, it fell flat for me. So it is what it is. The Unhoneymooners. 3 stars, and I say that begrudgingly. Honestly, maybe even 2 stars for me and 0 chili peppers. And the low rating is not because of the no spice. You know, the premise is cool, the main character's banter is funny, but at a certain point, since there are like fade to black scenes and not enough stuff happened to really keep my attention going, I just got uninterested. Okay, this is a heartbreak for me, okay? The Pumpkin Spice Cafe, 2 stars and 1 chili pepper. I so badly wanted to love this. I thought I would. I was like, a cute, cozy autumn read for me, woohoo. And then you know what? It was very one-dimensional. I was rooting for the couple, but they didn't really get deep with each other, in my opinion. It was very insta-love, and I don't vibe with that very much. And there was overall a lot of surface-level love, a lot of surface-level romance, and in my opinion, no real depth to the book. I'm sorry, I can't. Don't hate me. I really didn't mean to unintentionally quote Sex and the City there, but you get it. More Than Words. For me, this was a 1-star. I DNF'd it. Honestly, I couldn't continue this because I just simply did not get it. So first of all, the main female character describes the main male character as a sexist, as an elitist, and then he gives one semi-decent speech and all of a sudden he's everything that she thought she wanted. And then one thing happens between them and all of a sudden she's confused again, and it was giving me whiplash and I just was not in the mood. And I'm in this place right now where if I want to DNF a book, I DNF it, and that's what I did. The Love Wager, 3 stars and 1 chili pepper. Overall, I did enjoy this. I thought it was cute. Leather and Lark, 1 star. I DNF'd it at 47%, and I don't know how this happened. I loved book number 1, but honestly, I read almost 50% of the book, and it wasn't bad, but it wasn't particularly good either. I just wasn't invested, and I was feeling nothing, so I had to move on. And woo, that's it for all the reads this month. If you read any of these books, let me know what you thought about them down in the comments below. And hey, if you disagree with me, that's okay. Let's just all try and be respectful here. But anyway, if you made it to the end of this video, you are a beautiful, adorable bookmark, and you deserve a little treat. But thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, then please consider liking, subscribing, maybe even commenting, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.